We thank the coordinating committee for their diligence and hard work. We gather here today from over 25 countries, 117 organizations, 40 dignitaries and officials, 12 universities, 7 media organizations, and 10 different time zones. We thank you to our panelists and dignitaries for being here with us. We are eager to hear and learn from your experience and research. Our first speaker is Professor Wendy Rogers, MD, PhD. Dr. Rogers is a professor of clinical ethics at Macquarie University, Sydney. She has a long-standing interest in transplant ethics and has contributed to Australian national ethics guidelines on organ and tissue donation. She is chair of the International Advisory Committee of ETAC. In 2019, her team's work into unethical transplant research in China triggered over 20 retractions. Please welcome Dr. Rogers.
Thank you very much for that kind welcome. I'd like to thank the organisers and everyone who's attending today across the different time zones. And I acknowledge that I'm meeting today on the traditional lands of the Camaragal clan and of the Darug people of Indigenous peoples of Australia, and I pay my respects to their elders past, present and future. My talk is about ethics. Forced organ harvesting is a terrible wrong. Innocent people are killed so that their organs can be transplanted into other people who are willing to pay for them. Clearly, the Chinese Communist Party bears ultimate responsibility for forced organ harvesting. It is the CCP which has sanctioned the persecution of victim groups and permitted the development of industrial scale organ transplantation in China. But we cannot let it rest there by saying that the CCP is responsible and they should stop. As Sir Geoffrey has pointed out, the victims of forced organ harvesting are our fellow human beings. Their rights are being breached. They are owed the same basic regard for and protection of their rights as is owed to all human beings. And as fellow humans, we have some responsibility, some duty to respond to their plight. But some lines of responsibility are stronger and more compelling than others. And here I want to focus on institutional and professional responsibilities for acting to stop forced organ harvesting. There are two conditions for holding institutions and professionals responsible in this context. First is a knowledge one. The relevant institutions and professionals must be aware that forced organ harvesting is occurring in China. And the second condition is that these organisations and professionals must have power to act in ways that can help to stop forced organ harvesting. And I argue that both of these conditions are met. First, institutions and professionals should have grave ethical concerns about transplantation in China. There is no longer any excuse for willful ignorance about these transplant-related human rights abuses. Information about these abuses is compelling and detailed, and as Sir Geoffrey has outlined, the China Tribunal performed an independent and exhaustive examination of the evidence and unequivocally found that China is committing crimes against humanity. This finding has been widely publicised. The incarceration of the Uyghurs is likewise well known and has raised public awareness about human rights abuses, particularly in Xinjiang. There's no longer any excuse for any institution or professional involved in transplantation to claim that they know nothing about forced organ harvesting. So the first condition for being held responsible, the knowledge condition, is met. The second condition for responsibility is power. We can hold transplant professionals and institutionals responsible for not acting if they do have power to act in this context. And here we need to be clear about the type of power I have in mind. Do these institutions and professionals have the power to stop forced organ harvesting in China? Not directly. No individual or institution alone can force the CCP to stop. But acting together, professionals and institutions can exert significant pressure on China. They can demonstrate their abhorrence of what China is doing and show that such actions are not tolerated by the rest of the world. So given this responsibility, there are many specific actions that professionals and institutions should take. Transplant professionals should ask or demand that their professional organisations have an effective and enforced transplant policy for China that excludes transplant doctors from China as members, bans transplant doctors from China from attending or presenting at their meetings, and strongly advises their own members not to travel to China for transplant activities of any kind. Otherwise, engaging in educational research and research exchanges with China, business as usual, sends the message that those involved have no ethical concerns. Any normalized professional interaction provides implicit moral support for and endorsement of the Chinese transplant system and should therefore stop. Other actions that transplant professionals should take include informing patients about the links between organ trafficking and buying an organ in a foreign country as an organ tourist, and the nature of these dangers if they travel to China. They should lobby their members of parliament to ratify and implement the Council of Europe Convention against Trafficking in Human Organs, and they should raise public awareness about organ trafficking and the need for transnational solutions, because transplant professionals have high prestige and generally command the ears of people like MPs if they are aware of them. Transplant institutions should set up processes to check all research and education collaborations with China and stop any that involve transplant medicine. And transplant journals should ban publication of all Chinese transplant-related research, exclude transplant doctors from China as members of their editorial boards, and explain the reasons for these actions to their readers. None of these actions alone will stop forced organ harvesting in China, but together they will send a strong message that the rest of the world will not tolerate this atrocity. Those in the transplant world have an ethical responsibility to act. They have the necessary knowledge and the power to speak out and speak up. We should hold them responsible for their silence if they do not. Thank you.